Aztec spiritual clash. Imagine a city built on a lake, a metropolis of canals and floating gardens, grand pyramids reaching for the sky. This was Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire. But it was more than just a city. It was the center of a cosmos, a universe teeming with powerful, demanding gods. A world where the sun itself was a deity, Huitzilopochtli, who required the lifeblood of human hearts to win his daily battle against the darkness. A world where Tlaloc, the goggle-eyed god of rain, could grant a bountiful harvest or a devastating flood. And where Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, represented the complex duality of creation, knowledge, and the wind. This was not a religion confined to a temple. It was the very air the people breathed. Every mountain was a sacred entity, every storm a divine message, every planting season a negotiation with the earth. Time was not a straight line, but a series of cycles, great cosmic ages that were born and destroyed, and their own era, the fifth sun, was a fragile one, perpetually on the brink of collapse, held together by ritual, duty, and sacrifice. Into this intricate spiritual reality, the Spanish arrived in 1519. Their ships were not just filled with soldiers and horses, they were loaded with an entirely different cosmology. They carried the cross, the singular God of Abraham, and a burning conviction that they were on a holy mission. For the conquistadors, the Aztec pantheon was not a complex system of belief to be understood. It was a demonic legion to be vanquished. The statues of Coatlicue, the fearsome mother of the gods with her skirt of snakes, were not art, they were idols. The sacred ceremonies were not acts of faith, they were blasphemous orgies of idolatry. This was never going to be a simple military conquest. From the very beginning, it was a spiritual war, a clash of universes. When Tenochtitlan fell after a brutal siege, the physical destruction was immense. But the spiritual assault that followed was arguably more systematic and profound. The goal was not just to rule the people, but to erase their soul. The great Templo Mayor, the twin-shrined pyramid at the heart of the city, was torn down stone by stone. On its sacred ruins, the conquerors built their new cathedral, a literal and symbolic statement of dominance. Across the land, temples were razed, idols were smashed and burned in great pyres, and the sacred codices, the painted books that held generations of history, astronomy, and religious knowledge, were systematically destroyed. It was an attempt at a complete cultural and spiritual lobotomy, an effort to wipe the memory of the old gods from the face of the earth. Following the soldiers came the friars, Franciscans, Dominicans, Augustinians, tasked with the monumental job of converting millions to Catholicism. They learned the native languages, like Nahuatl, and tried to translate the concepts of Christianity. But how do you explain the Holy Trinity to a people whose worldview is fundamentally polytheistic? How do you convey the idea of a sin against a single, all-loving God to a culture whose morality was based on balance and reciprocity with a multitude of divine forces? The friars used what they could. They staged religious plays, created vivid murals depicting heaven and hell, and held mass baptisms where thousands were brought into the fold of the church at once. On the surface, the conversion of Mexico seemed a resounding success. The people were baptized, they attended Mass, they venerated the cross. But the friars, especially the more observant ones, began to notice something unsettling. The indigenous people were accepting the new faith, but they were not abandoning the old one. They were hiding it in plain sight. They would place small stone idols of their old gods behind the new statues of Christ and the saints in the churches. They would continue to make offerings of flowers, food, and copal incense, practices deeply rooted in their ancestral traditions, but now they were doing it at the foot of the cross.
They found echoes of their own beliefs within the new religion. The Christian saints, each with their own domain and story, felt strangely familiar to a people accustomed to a pantheon of gods with specific responsibilities. The vibrant rituals and pageantry of Catholic feast days resonated with their own tradition of elaborate communal ceremony. This wasn't a rejection of Catholicism, nor was it a simple one-to-one replacement. It was something far more complex and subtle. It was the beginning of a profound spiritual alchemy. The outright war for Mexico's soul was over, but a quieter, more insidious process had just begun. The gods were not dead. They were simply learning to wait, to adapt, and to find new masks to wear. The stage was set for a hidden continuation, a spiritual resilience that would prove far stronger than stone temples and far more enduring than the conquerors could have ever imagined.
Syncretism's hidden power. Out of the smoking ruins of the Aztec spiritual world, a new strategy for survival emerged. It was a strategy born of necessity, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will to preserve a cultural core. This was not a war fought with obsidian-bladed swords, but with symbols, stories, and sacred spaces. It's a phenomenon we now call religious syncretism, the blending of different, often contradictory, belief systems. But in 16th century Mexico, it was more than an academic concept. It was a revolutionary act of spiritual resistance. It was a way for the indigenous people to outwardly accept the religion of their conquerors while covertly continuing to worship their own deities, ensuring the spiritual heart of Mesoamerica continued to beat, just under a new Catholic skin. The most powerful and enduring example of this phenomenon is the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe. To understand her power, you must first understand who she replaced, Tonantzin. For the Nahua people, Tonantzin, whose name means our sacred mother, was a revered mother goddess. She was a deity of the earth, of fertility, of sustenance. She was the gentle, life-giving aspect of the divine feminine, and her primary shrine was located on a small hill just outside the former capital, a hill called Tepeyac. For generations, people had made pilgrimages to Tepeyac to honor her, to ask for her blessing, to connect with the sacred mother who sustained them. After the conquest, her temple was destroyed, and her worship was forbidden. Then, in 1531, just a decade after the fall of Tenochtitlan, something extraordinary happened. A poor, Christianized indigenous man named Juan Diego reported seeing an apparition of the Virgin Mary on that very same hill of Tepeyac. But this wasn't a Spanish virgin. She had dark skin, indigenous features, and she spoke to him in his native Nahuatl. She asked for a church to be built in her honor on that exact spot. The image she miraculously imprinted on Juan Diego's cloak, or tilma, is filled with layers of symbolism that would have been instantly recognizable to the indigenous population. She stands on a crescent moon, a symbol associated with major Aztec deities, and she is surrounded by rays of the sun, yet she blocks the sun, suggesting she is greater than Huitzilopochtli, the sun god himself. The Spanish clergy saw this as a miraculous tool for conversion, and it was. But for the indigenous people, it was something more. When they flocked to the new shrine at Tepeyac to worship Our Lady of Guadalupe, who were they truly praying to? They were praying to the Virgin Mary, yes, but they were also praying to Tonantzin. They even continued to call her Tonantzin Guadalupe. The sacred place was the same, the divine feminine energy was the same. Tonantzin had not been vanquished. She had been given a new, acceptable face. She had found a way to survive, to become the spiritual mother of a new mixed race or mestizo nation. This wasn't a simple replacement. It was a masterful fusion, a reinterpretation that allowed an ancient faith to thrive within the very heart of the new one. This brilliant strategy of mapping the old gods onto the new saints was repeated across Mexico. Take Tlaloc, the powerful and feared Aztec god of rain, lightning, and agriculture. In a society dependent on the harvest, keeping Tlaloc happy was a matter of life and death.
The Spanish brought with them the veneration of Santiago Matamoros, or Saint James the Moorslayer. He was a warrior saint, often depicted charging into battle on a white horse. To the Spanish, he was a symbol of Christian victory. But to the indigenous people, the thunderous sound of his horse's hoofs galloping across the sky sounded just like Tlaloc's thunder. The flashes of his sword looked like Tlaloc's lightning. And so, in many communities, the reverence for the storm god was subtly transferred to the warrior saint. Festivals for Santiago often involved rituals asking for rain, a clear echo of the ancient rites for Tlaloc. Even the most complex and fearsome Aztec gods found new homes. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, was a god of the night sky, of destiny, sorcery, and unpredictable change. He was a powerful, ambiguous figure, an all-seeing creator and destroyer. It was difficult to find a direct parallel among the benevolent saints. But his darker, more mysterious, and all-powerful nature found a strange resonance in the figure of the Black Christ, statues of a dark-skinned, suffering Jesus found in many Mexican churches. These figures, objects of intense devotion, embodied a sense of mystery, power, and fate that echoed the pre-Hispanic reverence for Tezcatlipoca. The gods were not just changing their names, they were adapting their very essence to fit into the new spiritual landscape. This was a hidden pantheon, a secret roster of ancient deities living a double life as Catholic saints, their true identities known only to those who understood the old ways. It was a quiet, unseen conquest in reverse.
Block 3. Modern Mexico Spiritual Legacy. Centuries have passed since the initial clash. The Spanish Empire is gone, and Mexico is a vibrant, modern nation. But if you look closely, you can see that the ancient gods never truly left. Their rule today isn't about secret ceremonies in hidden caves, it's far more profound. Their influence is woven into the very fabric of Mexican culture, shaping its identity, its art, and its unique and passionate expression of faith. The unseen conquest of the past has resulted in a living spiritual legacy that is visible everywhere once you know where to look. The most spectacular example is Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. On the surface, it aligns with the Catholic holidays of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. But its heart and soul are purely Mesoamerican. This is not a somber, mournful event about loss. It is a vibrant, joyful celebration of the cycle of life and death, a concept central to the Aztec worldview. The core belief of Dia de Muertos is that for one night, the veil between the worlds thins, and the souls of the departed return to feast, drink, and celebrate with their living relatives. This idea is a direct descendant of pre-Hispanic festivals honoring the dead and the goddess Mictacasihuatl, the queen of Mictlan, the underworld. Look at the ofrendas, the elaborate altars families build in their homes. They are laden with Catholic symbols like crosses and images of saints, but they are also structured around ancient principles. They include the 4 elements: water to quench the spirit's thirst, fire in the form of candles to light their way, earth represented by food, and wind represented by papel picado, delicate tissue paper banners that flutter in the breeze. The iconic flower of the season, the cempasúchil or marigold, was known as the flower of the dead to the Aztecs. Its pungent scent believed to guide the spirits home. The sugar skulls, the playful skeletons, the food and drink left for the ancestors, it is all a continuation of a spiritual conversation that began thousands of years ago. The Aztec gods of death may no longer be worshipped by name, but their philosophy that death is not an end, but a natural, integral part of life's journey, is the reigning spirit of Mexico's most important national holiday. This blending is the hallmark of what is often called Mexican folk Catholicism. It is a faith of immense passion, color, and community. The relationship many Mexicans have with the saints, particularly the Virgin of Guadalupe, is intensely personal and powerful.
Saints are not just distant heavenly figures, they are active intercessors, patrons, and protectors, much like the old pantheon of gods who had specific domains and could be appealed to for help with everything from a good harvest to a safe journey. Local patron saint festivals, or fiestas patronales, are often the most important event of the year in a town. Combining Catholic Mass with processions, fireworks, and sometimes traditional dances and rituals that have pre-Hispanic origins, their original meanings lost to some, but their spiritual power still deeply felt. This duality is the very soul of modern Mexican identity. It's a constant dialogue between its European and indigenous roots. You see it immortalized in the art of the great muralists like Diego Rivera, who painted vast canvases celebrating Mexico's Aztec past as a source of national pride. You see it in the work of Frida Kahlo, whose self-portraits are a tapestry of Catholic suffering and Aztec symbolism. Mexico's national identity is a conversation between two worlds, a mestizo identity that doesn't choose one over the other, but embraces the complexity of both. The unseen conquest wasn't about one side winning, it was about the creation of something entirely new, a culture that holds its entire history, both conquered and conqueror, within itself. The old gods continue to rule not as deities demanding sacrifice, but as powerful cultural ancestors. Their presence is felt in the deep connection to family, in the acceptance of life's dualities, and in the resilient, creative, and profoundly spiritual character of the Mexican people. The conquest of armies ended centuries ago, but the spiritual landscape they created proves that some transformations are a form of victory, and some gods never, ever die.